The public is conditioned to look for missiles. Geopolitical risk alerts for NASDAQ are priced for kinetic events. This is a deliberate misdirection. The primary vector for systemic collapse is not a launch. It is silence. While legacy media fixates on a U.S. warship at a China-backed Cambodian naval base or the latest Russian offensive assessment, the real theater of operations is uncontested. It is silent, and it is deep underwater. The protocol is already being tested. The surge in cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure in nations like Ethiopia is not a regional problem. It is a blueprint for asymmetric warfare, documented by CSYS. The objective is to sever the digital nervous system of the state. The ultimate weapon is severance, a precise, deniable cut to a subsea cable cluster, a blinding pulse against a key satellite constellation. This imposes silence, halting trillions in automated financial transactions and severing military command and control. This protocol is designed to create the blind Leviathan. A conventionally superior power, stripped of its data stream, is reduced to a state of paralysis. Its immense kinetic strength becomes a systemic liability, an engine of uncontrolled escalation. The mathematical certainty is that it cannot absorb the economic damage, nor can it afford the kinetic cost of a response to a silent, unattributable attack. Its strength has become the vector for its own solvency crisis. The motive is not expansion, it is survival. A state actor facing a terminal solvency crisis does not retreat. It recalculates the vector of attack. CSIS analysis confirms the kinetic phase of the Ukraine conflict has become a catastrophic domestic liability for Russia. The astronomical burn rate of conventional assets, coupled with an unpopular mandate, creates a mathematical certainty. The war, in its current form, is unwinnable on a national balance sheet. This is not a political opinion. It is an accounting problem. The Institute for the Study of Wars assessments, such as the one from January 24, 2026, detail a grueling, high-attrition ground war. This is a strategy of diminishing returns. Every ruble spent on artillery shells is a ruble that cannot be used to stabilize the domestic economy. This forces a pivot. Weakness on the conventional battlefield is no longer a constraint. It is the trigger for a new protocol. The protocol shifts the conflict from kinetic cost to asymmetric leverage. The objective is no longer to seize territory but to cripple the adversary's core systems from within. The blueprint is visible in parallel conflicts. Reports from Ethiopia detail a surge in cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure. This is the testbed. Low-cost, deniable operations that generate systemic, high-cost consequences for the target state. The warfighting model is being ported from the physical to the systemic. Therefore, the motive is a launch-on-warning response to impending national insolvency. When you cannot afford to fight your adversary's military, you attack their economic liquidity. You convert their interconnectedness, their greatest strength, into their most profound liability. The geopolitical risk alerts now attached to entities like NASDAQ, MSFT, are not a side effect of war. They are the objective. The math is irrefutable. Economic destabilization is the most cost-effective form of modern warfare. The core calculation of warfare has been broken. The Royal United Services Institute, RUSI, has quantified the new economics of lethality. A $5 million main battle tank, a symbol of industrial-era power, is now systematically neutralized by a $500 FPV drone. This is a 10-to-1 asymmetric cost imposition. It is not attrition. It is an economic vector designed to induce a solvency crisis. This protocol is known as the democratization of violence. The barrier to entry for projecting lethal kinetic force has collapsed from a state-level industrial base to an off-the-shelf commercial transaction. This mathematical leverage allows weaker actors to systematically drain a superior power's treasury, converting every defensive asset into an economic liability. The where is no longer a country. It is a network. Conventional geography is a legacy constraint. The modern battlespace is a distributed, non-physical territory where protocols are tested before deployment. These are the gray zones, proxy laboratories where the cost-to-damage ratio of asymmetric attacks is perfected. Examine the data. Capital newspaper confirms Ethiopia is facing an alarming surge in cyber attacks targeting critical infrastructure. This is not random insurgency. It is a live fire exercise. State and non-state actors are using Ethiopia as a laboratory to calibrate the precise algorithmic payload required to collapse a nation's power grid, banking system, and water supply with minimal kinetic cost. The goal is a replicable blueprint. Simultaneously, the physical gray zone is being mapped. The USS Cincinnati's arrival at Cambodia's Ream Naval Base, a facility expanded with direct Chinese support, is not diplomacy. It is a probe. According to U.S. Navy documentation, it is a port visit, but strategists read it as a live test of sensor penetration, response times, and signals intelligence in a contested environment. Each side is calibrating the other's tripwires for a kinetic response. These are not disconnected events. The cyber attack vectors perfected in Ethiopia are the exact asymmetric threats geopolitical risk alerts, like the one from Global Wolf Street, warn could target NASDAQ-listed assets. The Institute for the Study of War's campaign assessments now must factor in how a physical standoff in the South China Sea could be preceded by a non-kinetic attack on the U.S. financial system, an attack rehearsed in a proxy laboratory thousands of miles away. Therefore, regional instability is merely the visible symptom of a systemic strategy. These gray zones are test beds for the protocol that converts an adversary's economic strength into a systemic liability. The blueprint is being finalized. The next deployment will not be in a proxy state. It will be against a primary economic node. The solvency trap is not a risk. It is a mathematical certainty being calibrated in plain sight. The final decision is no longer human. It is a mathematical calculation forced by a digital ghost. The doctrine is known as launch on warning. According to analysts at CSYS, this is a Cold War protocol designed to guarantee a retaliatory strike. If early warning systems detect incoming missiles, you launch your own before the first enemy warhead can liquidate your arsenal. The logic is brutal, but internally consistent. It prevents a decapitation strike. Now, introduce the cyber vector. The blueprint is already operational. Reports from Capital newspaper confirm Ethiopia faces a surge in cyber attacks targeting its critical infrastructure. This is not random vandalism. It is a test run. Hostile actors are mapping the systemic vulnerabilities of a nation's core functions. They are learning to turn the lights off on command. This leads to the fog of digital war. A low-cost, asymmetric cyber attack doesn't target the missile silos. It targets the satellites and radar arrays. As global tensions escalate, documented in geopolitical risk alerts concerning the U.S., China, and Russia, the probability of such an event approaches certainty. The screens in the command center go black. Is it a system failure or a precursor to a kinetic strike? The commander is now trapped by protocol. Waiting for confirmation is a solvency risk. If the blindness is a precursor to attack, waiting guarantees total asset liquidation. The adversary has weaponized our own defense system against us. Fear of being disarmed forces the launch. The kinetic cost is secondary to the mathematical certainty of the trap. This is how an adversary converts an opponent's strength, its automated defense, into a terminal liability. The protocol is being field tested. While legacy media focuses on kinetic events like the Russian offensive campaigns analyzed by the Institute for the Study of War, the real vector of attack is economic. We are past the warning stage. Analysts at CSYS note that the surge in cyber attacks on Ethiopian critical infrastructure was not a regional problem. It was a low-cost dress rehearsal. It established a baseline for disabling national-level assets with plausible deniability. Physical space probes are now being synchronized with digital threats. The arrival of the USS Cincinnati at Cambodia's Ream Naval Base, a facility expanded with Chinese support, was a deliberate kinetic test of boundaries. According to U.S. Navy reports, this was a simple port visit. According to the blueprint, it was a trigger. It forces the adversary to show their hand, creating the political cover required for the asymmetric counter. The calibration shot will not be an aircraft carrier. It will target systemic liquidity. The objective is to measure the response function of the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve when confronted with an attribution impossible crisis. It is a mathematical problem designed to quantify the breaking point of an economic superpower. Expect a coordinated, multi-hour blackout of the NY4 and NJ2 data center clusters within the next 12 months. This will not be a simple power failure. It will be a logic bomb targeting the core matching engines of the NASDAQ and NYSE simultaneously. The event will be officially attributed to a cascading software update failure or a solar flare anomaly. The true metric, however, will be the multi-trillion-dollar liquidity freeze it triggers and the calculated inaction of the conventionally superior power. The test is to see if they will absorb the economic damage. They will.